All right.
Hi, and welcome to First Tuesdays. My name is Nona Burling, and I am relatively new at this, so I'm going to just advance some slides and hope I get this right. Yes, there I am. I'm Nona Burling. I work here at the Washington State Library, and in addition to me, we have Jeremy Stroud, who you just heard talking. He is our tech support. You can see on the screen that we have his phone number and email address. In addition, if you look on the left-hand side of your screen, Jeremy and Joe, who's our next slide, are here to help you if you're having any technical difficulties or problems with sound. You can give one of them a call. They have their phone numbers right next to their name. So let me see. Our next slide is brought to you by, this is the Washington State Library, and the program is also supported by the Institute of Museum and Library Services, and so we are the sponsors of this program today. We ask that you, in the chat, please type in, this is for our record keeping. As you all know, if you're coming from a library, we've all got to keep numbers. We'd like to know if more than one person is watching this, the number of participants that are dialed in from your location, the library or organization you represent, and the city or state. And at the very end of the presentation, we are going to have a very quick, I believe it's a 4-question follow-up survey, and that we ask that you fill that out again for our record keeping. Thanks a lot. Now let's move on. This is our presentation we're very excited about. It's called Back to Reality, Librarians Helping Patrons Navigate the World During Reentry. This is a very hot topic in library land, I'm sure you all know, and we have 2 really great presenters today. Anna Nash is an institutional librarian here at the Washington State Library. She's worked in public, academic, and institutional libraries. And while working in institutional libraries, Anna also earned her MLIS from the University of Washington. She's had more than 7 years of experience providing library services to the incarcerated and developing several programs during that time. One of her favorite activities is traveling, and her visits to libraries around the world have influenced her view of the roles and value of libraries. In addition, we have her partner, Adrienne Breznau, is the Public Services Supervisor at the Kitsap Regional Library here in Washington State. Adrienne received her MLIS from the University of Denver in 2007 and wound up in prison completely by accident during the Great Recession. I really like that line, Adrienne. After spending 6 years as a prison librarian at the Denver Women's Correctional Facility, a family job change in 2015 landed Adrienne in Washington State, where she's an advocate for prison library patrons on the public side. Adrienne enjoys spending time doing all things outdoors with her husband Ryan and dog Denver. And Adrienne, you moved to a great state if you love the outdoors. And now I'm going to stop talking and let you guys take it away.
Thank you, Nona. Hello, everyone. So this presentation is going to be kind of the basics of what reentry and what reentry means, what incarceration is, and some of the difficulties that are faced by people who are reentering to society and how libraries can help them.
So we're going to tell you a little bit about us and why this topic is important to us. And if you would please write in the chat box why you're interested in this topic as well.
So this is Anna Nash on the left, and I'm the one who's there with Matthew Lesko, who some of you may recognize. So the reason I included Matthew Lesko in this slide is that I think the way he thinks about information and access to information and the right that people have to access information jives a lot with how I think about libraries and what they are and what services they provide. I think that access to information is a right, particularly in prison. I am dedicated to providing information to people who are incarcerated. I think it's a situation where a lot of times a lot of rights are taken away, and I like that, at least in Washington, information is available to everybody. I've also included on here the pursuit of happiness and safer communities, because I think they really go hand in hand. From what I've seen, a lot of people are very interested in contributing to their communities and not coming back to prison. They want to do good and give back, but a lot of times that's more difficult for some than it is for others. And I think if we give everybody the opportunity to be happy, healthy citizens, it contributes to a safer community.
This is Adrienne. I'm the one on the right. That's a picture of me from my prison days. And this topic is really important to me because when everyone goes from surviving to thriving, you know, we have a better connected community, and a strong community is a connected one. Also, social justice is really important to me as well. I don't think it's right that people make mistakes in their lives, get a felony, and then it affects them for the rest of their life, even after they've served their time. So let's take a look at the chat box and see why some of you are interested in this topic.
So Janice Vance says that her students who've been away to ramp into the ways that college works now. Yes, one of the things that, at least in Washington, is really stressed is that higher education is a path to a better life. For recidivism rates, which we'll talk about in a moment, the recidivism rate dropped drastically when someone gets just a 2-year degree. So there are a lot of students who have previously been incarcerated who are highly encouraged to go back to school when they release, and college libraries, community college libraries, and academic libraries are a great avenue for them to, you know, be reoriented with their community.
Mm-hmm.
Jennifer Lane, who is with the law libraries, gets questions from inmates who are trying to get ILLs. And that is another really important service. And I know that the Washington Law Library is trying to work with the Washington State Department of Corrections to provide those ILLs. But I think my understanding is that the process is a little stymied right now.
Mm-hmm. See, Crystal Wilder from USM Gorham just started offering space for a reentry program this summer. That is awesome.
That is so awesome. That's great. I'm so glad to hear that.
Oh, hi, Teresa. I used to work with Teresa in Colorado. So she's working with library staff in Colorado juvenile correctional facilities. So that's awesome. Juvenile facilities are not really in our background, but that is a very important part of having a successful reentry, because if you can keep someone from going back to adult prison, you'll really help them with the rest of their lives. Oh, I miss you guys too.
I think that I used to work in a shelter for youth, 18 to 25, and after the youth hit 25, there was a really sharp decline in the number of people who were able to get out of homelessness. And I think that the same can be said for people who are in juvenile facilities versus adult correctional facilities. I think that the older we get, the harder it is to break cycles of, incarceration and, leave what we know.
I completely agree. So now we're going to talk about some important definitions that if you haven't worked in a prison setting, you might not be familiar with. And we're also going to ask you to select the yes or no answer from your poll. That's the little checkbox on the top under your name. If you would please let us know, have you ever had any patrons self-identify as having previously been incarcerated during your work as a librarian?
And just so you know, the definition of incarceration is the act of incarcerating or the fact of being incarcerated or imprisoned. So basically what this means is it's jail and prison, most simply stated. So the biggest difference between jail and prison is that jail is prior to sentencing. And once somebody is sentenced, once they go before a judge and they receive a sentence, if they receive a sentence that is 366 days, that's a year and a day or more, they go to prison. If they receive a sentence that is less than a year or less, they stay in jail and serve the remainder of their sentence there. So there are a lot of different kind of nuanced incarceration kind of ways to think about it. There's also juvenile rehabilitation. I'm glad that we've got somebody represented from the juvenile rehabilitation side. There's also commitment, which is kind of a hospitalization, or for people who are committed for sex offenses. There are many different types of incarceration or commitment that can occur where someone is being held against their will by the state. And we would like to let everybody know that our experience is with prison. So we will be speaking very specifically to the prison populations, though a lot of the information that we will be talking about can be applied to people who are leaving incarceration from jail, juvenile rehabilitation, or a commitment situation.
And then one other thing we'd like to note, there is a difference between state prisons and federal prisons, and Anna's and my background is with the state prison systems. So recidivism is a term that you'll hear a lot. Basically, it refers to a person going back to prison after they've already served sanctions, either because they violated their parole or they've committed a new crime. And for the purposes of our program, we are considering recidivism being people returning to prison within 3 years following their release. So Washington's recidivism rate for 2013 releases is 31.4%. However, stats can be interpreted in many different ways, and that 31% was just 2013. And I know Anna said that she's been hearing that the Washington recidivism rate is too high, so just take that with a grain of salt. When I was in Colorado, the average was hovering around 50%.
Yes, this 31% was provided by the Department of Corrections. So the information that's provided is provided in probably a way that will reflect well on the Washington Department of Corrections. So, but generally speaking, recidivism is considered to be way too high in the United States. It is. Mm-hmm. Basically, anything over 0% is too high.
Exactly. So the next term that you'll need to know is reentry. So that's basically the action of reentering or coming back into a place, or coming back into mainstream society after spending time being incarcerated, either in prison or mental health institution, juvenile facility.
And I also included definition 2D down there, astronaut, the return of a spacecraft into the atmosphere, because I think that returning from incarceration is a lot like returning from space. There are a lot of people involved. It's very complicated. If it goes poorly, it goes really poorly, and it's a pretty turbulent and traumatic time.
So our plan is to help keep people from burning up in reentry.
I would also like to note that there is a big move on the people who are working with reentry to remove that hyphen, which is why in the definition I removed the hyphen. Just a little bit of a librarian kind of note.
So in Washington, the reentry rate hovers between 84 and 96%. Again, you can interpret those statistics in many different ways. The 84% does include people who have life with the possibility of parole, but they might not successfully advocate for their release. But generally, a lot of people will get out of prison and they will be your neighbors. So we need to do everything that we can to help them be successful.
And if you're interested in more of these statistics, they can be found on the Washington Department of Corrections website. We have a link there, but the way this Blackboard works is it's just an image of the screen. If anybody is interested in getting these links, we have our email addresses at the end of the presentation. Please just contact us. So now that we've gone over some of the definitions, we want to talk about some of the contributing factors that lead to what we consider to be a successful reentry. And we would like to stress that these are contributing factors to a person becoming a happy, healthy member of the community, not necessarily recidivating or returning to prison. So somebody can have difficulty with all of these different factors and not return to prison, but what we would like to see is that people return to the community and thrive. There are a lot of statistics that contribute to the list that we've created, but most of it is anecdotal. It's from the experiences that we have had serving people who are returning to society. So the first one that we have on here is family involvement. And this is the reason that it's first, is that it's one that's been studied quite a lot. Family involvement is one of the #1 factors in determining whether or not somebody returns to society successfully. This one does have a lot of evidence to back up how much it contributes to recidivism. So in the Washington Department of Corrections systems, and I would imagine most across the United States, visits from families is the #1 priority for the facilities to provide, to make accessible to people. Just think about if all of your family members left and disappeared, how difficult it would be to, you don't have any money, you don't have any savings, you don't have a job, to return to a situation or to enter a situation where you have no assistance. So family involvement is a huge factor.
Another huge factor is planning. If you go to prison and you're going to get out and you don't start planning for your reentry until a month or two out, it's going to be really hard to be successful. In Colorado, we used to say reentry begins on day 1. So if you can get people to start planning from the moment they get in there, they're going to have a more successful reentry.
And this is also something that I think is not stressed enough in incarcerated settings. It's not enough of a conversation. I get a lot of people, I work in a facility that has a lot of short-term people. I get a lot of people coming to the library, a month before they release, and they have no housing, they have no financial assistance, and they are just like scrambling to get information.
We see people in the public libraries as well. They'll parole homeless, and so they come in because the library is really one of the only places that they can go. So we do a lot of help finding places to live and food resources. So
we've had this presentation at a couple of different locations, and when we ask people if individuals have self-identified as homeless, every once in a while we'll get someone who says, yeah, we're 5 blocks from the jail, and we get people with their box of belongings and who just come to the library because the staff at the prison or the jail said, the library is that way, you can find out how to get a bus, and get no information or assistance. So forms of identification are an enormous factor. There are a lot of people who, going back to family involvement, who have burned a lot of bridges, who don't have access to the documents that would allow them to get a job or housing. And unfortunately, in Washington, there isn't a good system in place for people to be able to get their Social Security card, birth certificate, or driver's license, or even just a Washington State identification card prior to release. Many people will release with a Department of Corrections ID. This is for the prison system. It's a green ID that has their name, DOC number, height, weight, things like that. But the name that's on the ID isn't necessarily their legal name, so it can't be used as a legal form of identification because the name that appears on the ID next to their photo is not necessarily their, legal name.
Our dream is to have everyone released from prison with all the identification that they need and a library card.
And a library card.
So another contributing factor is length of incarceration, but we have an asterisk by that because length of incarceration doesn't affect recidivism rate, but in our experience it does contribute to success on the outside and ease of reentry.
So just imagine if you had previously been incarcerated for 20 years. What was 20 years? 2007. So, oh no, that's 10 years.
97.
1997.
Oh
so there are people who have been incarcerated for 20 years, became incarcerated in 1997. I was quite young. Nobody had cell phones.
No.
Maybe there was some light email use.
Mm-hmm.
So it's a very different world technologically. And even just like from 5 years ago.
Yes.
So training, education, and work experience. There are a lot of opportunities available in prison, but a little while ago, and this has changed recently, a little while ago there was a House bill that stated that the state funds federal funds could not be used to provide higher education to people who are incarcerated in Washington. So the training and education that's available in prison is GED and vocational skills training, which is very great, it's important, and it gives people a lot of opportunities, but only if they're available at the institution that they're physically at, only if they take them, only if it's something that they can, take out into the real world. And it has done amazing work. There's a program at the women's facility called, I've already forgotten what it's called, but it offers women who are at the women's facility apprenticeship programs for a lot of different organizations. So there's framers, construction, iron workers, which if you look into iron work apprenticeships, it sounds just very difficult, but it gives those women an opportunity to make a really good, get a really good paying job when they release. So if they have excellent training, education, work experience, they're more likely to be successful. Unfortunately, a lot of times that's not something that everybody has.
I did meet someone at a union conference who had participated in that program at
Track.
She participated in the track program, and she told everyone there how getting her apprenticeship and then getting a job and joining the union just changed her life so much for the better. She was able to get a job where she was paid a living wage so that she could take care of her family and their needs, and that's huge to have that when you get out of prison. Which leads into our next topic of money.
Money. Of course, money is a factor basically to thriving in any situation. Unfortunately, a lot of people who become incarcerated are at a very distinct disadvantage because they have not been earning money. They probably have previous debts that they haven't necessarily taken care of, and there are also legal financial obligations. So legal financial obligations, or LFOs, are the costs associated with either becoming incarcerated or the sentencing or their crimes, and they can be hundreds of thousands of dollars, and they are obligated to pay them back. It's like any debt, but it's controlled by the government, so they have to pay back their LFOs, and unfortunately for those of us who have student loans, there isn't like a repayment plan option. They have to pay them. It's a difficult situation that people have in addition to struggling just to survive.
And many of you might not know this, but people in prison make around,
42 cents an hour.
Yep, 42 cents an hour in Washington. In Colorado, they made around 60 cents a day when I left. And after you have to pay for restitution and
child support,
and buying stuff from canteen, it doesn't leave much left over for you to save for when you get out.
There is an obligation for people who are working to save for their release. And so, if somebody is incarcerated for 20 years and they make $55 a month, and $10 of that is saved, that's a good chunk of money. But when you have to buy everything from scratch, you have to pay first and last month's rent and fees to move in, you have to pay for clothes to go to a job interview. That money doesn't stay around very long.
No.
So mental and physical health. I've had a couple of volunteers come into the library, and one of the things that one of the individuals noted was that one of the differences between the public library and a prison library is that everybody is clean and healthy. So people who are addicted to drugs, by and large, don't have access to those drugs. And people who have mental health issues are being seen by professionals who are providing prescription drugs. So when someone releases, they release into the community with 3 months of medication. But if they don't get services set up, or if their mental health is severe enough that they need somebody to hold their hand through that process, it can be very difficult for them to get everything going. Currently, people who are releasing from incarceration are being signed up for AppleCare, which is wonderful. It's been a huge benefit to people who are releasing. But if somebody has a physical handicap or they're disabled in some way, Social Security benefits take a long time to get reinstated, and assistance for people who have difficulty advocating for themselves already can be even more difficult to access.
So the conditions on the day of the release can be a contributing factor to success. Sometimes people who are releasing from prison just get some bus tokens.
Yep.
And they're like, have fun. Good luck.
I work at the Washington Correction Center in Shelton, and for people who are not being picked up by a friend or family member, they are dropped off at a gas station nearby where a bus picks them up and takes them to Olympia. But they don't have a lot of information about the mechanics of that. They just get a ticket and are expected to report to their county of origin, which I will talk about now. So the conditions of sentence and community supervision. Conditions of sentence are conditions that are applied to a person by a judge. So if somebody has a crime that involves computers, one of the conditions may be that they are not allowed to use computers. And I know that that sounds totally wacko, but it is an actual condition of sentence. If they have a condition of sentence that they complete drug and alcohol treatment programs and they don't take advantage of that while they're incarcerated, or the drug and alcohol treatment programs are full while they're incarcerated, or they're there for a shorter period of time, and they don't have the opportunity to take advantage of the resources that are available. And so they may have to get out into the community and access those services and pay for them by themselves. And then community supervision, I think, is actually it can be a pretty positive thing. It can be negative depending on the individual and the person supervising them. But community supervision is that when someone when someone serves their sentence, a lot of times they'll get out prior to their maximum release date. And if they do that, then a lot of times they have to be supervised by a community corrections officer, and they'll have to do that in their county of origin. So county of origin is the first county that a person, familiar, taking your thing. So the first county that someone is booked for a crime, the first county that they commit a crime and are arrested for, is their county of origin. So it doesn't matter if the current crime that they have committed was committed in Seattle and they've lived in Seattle their whole life. If they, had a DUI or, had some sort of crime that they committed in Clarkston, for example, that's where they're going to release to. And they'll be supervised by somebody in the community, but they're obligated to go to that county of origin during their supervision. So if they're not familiar with the area that they're releasing to, then it can be very difficult for them. It can be a positive and a negative, honestly. There are criminogenic factors that contribute to a person. There are criminogenic factors that people have studied and have noted contribute to a person's likelihood to reoffend. And one of the big factors is their association with people who have antisocial tendencies. So if they are hanging out with all of their friends that they committed the crimes with, they're more likely to reoffend. So if they go to a new community, a new area, it might be a positive for them, but they might also not have access to the assistance that would be available to them in a place that they were familiar with. So it is a factor.
So the final factor that we've identified as contributing to success is the idea of commitment to change. Change needs to be intrinsic and start on a micro level in order to be really effective. And one thing that I noticed in prison a lot is people were experiencing learned helplessness. And they would say, I'm here, there's nothing that I can do to better my situation. And so they wouldn't start planning for reentry because their whole focus was just how they are right now. So if we can help people formalize their commitment to change, they'll have a more successful reentry. So I want to take a look at that poll and see how many of you have self-identified. What? Oh, it's too late now.
It's turned off, but
sorry.
So one more thing about that commitment to change. So I attend reentry resource fairs, and Adrienne has attended reentry resource fairs, and we have an organization that we've created called Walther, which we'll get to a little bit later, and we're sharing information about reentry fairs for prisons with other librarians from around the state who are interested in coming in. And one person that I had come in noted about how at these reentry fairs where people are getting access to services, they're getting in touch with like DSHS and different community organizations that are specifically for helping people during reentry, that so much of the program was a pep talk.
Mm-hmm.
So on the lines of that learned helplessness, it's very easy to think that because you've released and become incarcerated and released and become incarcerated, that you're just not cut out for it, that there are so many factors stacked against you that you just can't succeed. So it's not even just a commitment to change. It's the belief that if you try, you can make it. So, and now we're going to talk about what libraries can do to help. So now that we have discussed some of the factors that contribute to success or failure, however you define that in reentry, we'd like to ask you all what you think your libraries can do to help. I know that there's a law library represented, and there's somebody in an academic library. So what services or programs do you have that could be helpful to somebody during reentry? And we have somebody identify as starting a reentry program. So if you're in a system who has a program that specifically targets people during reentry, what is that program? If you could comment in the chat box, we would love to hear from you.
Thank you for that poll update, Nono. So she said it was 4 people who have had patrons self-identify as being recently incarcerated and 1 no.
We've actually
so that's pretty
also had a
interesting.
number of new people in the session since that poll was done. So
yes.
it may be interesting to redo it. We've almost doubled the size of the room.
Oh yeah, so now that we have more people in attendance, could everybody respond on the poll? So if you look below your name, there's a line that says participants and then your name, and there is a smiley. Oh, Jeremy's showing you right now. So the polling response is the little checkbox that he's circling right there. So if you could all respond, have you had anybody self-identify as having previously been incarcerated?
Oh, wow.
Oh, that's great.
Mm-hmm.
8 people yes and 1 person no. Yeah, and one of the things I really enjoy about working in prison is that a lot of the stigma is removed when everybody is in the same situation. And so I'm glad that that is continuing out into the society, into the community, and that people feel that librarians are allies and that they can entrust them with that information.
Yeah. All right, so we'll talk a little bit about what libraries can do to help from our end, and then we'll go through the responses to what you guys have in your libraries right now. So one big thing for me is having story time and kids programs at times when working parents can attend. Because if you are a recently released single mom, you have to get a job to support your children, and you might not be able to make a story time that's on a Wednesday at 10 a.m., but you might be able to make one that's at 6 p.m. for pajama story time or on a weekend. So just being mindful of having programs to help with family reunification and bonding at times when more people can attend. Another thing that libraries can do is know the resources, but also be skeptical of the resources. I was recently looking for a document about free meals in Kitsap County, and on the DSHS site, the document was approximately 5 years old. And I found the current one on the Kitsap County website. So, just be mindful that sometimes what you're looking at hasn't been updated because of lack of staff. So we have a really good resource to help you with current information that we'll share at the end. Another big thing is visit the reentry fairs at Washington, D.O.C. You know, I came to one. There was someone from Timberland there, and we made a lot of connections, and it's nice to just get that friendly face in front of people and say, hey, my name's Adrienne. I'm at Kitsap Regional Library. Come see me. I will help you. And then they don't have to feel bad going up to someone and being like, I just got out of prison. Can you help me? And worry about being judged or not treated fairly, even though, you know, as librarians, we strive to make sure that everyone feels welcome. But sometimes there are those intrinsic biases, and we just have to be mindful of them. Learn the answers on the Ask Questions document. We will share that with you as well, but here's a screenshot of the top part of it. So the more you know your library's policies and procedures, the better you can help people re-entering society. Like we were talking earlier, people don't have, you know, proper ID when they get released from prison. So how can you help them register for a library card? You know, at Kitsap Regional Library, if someone doesn't have an ID with their current address, we mail them their card, and they can still check out 2 items at that time. They can use temporary internet passes. You know, it doesn't take a library card to print, scan, or fax, so we can still definitely help people. Go ahead to the next slide. Cultivate a welcoming environment. You know, everyone wants to be treated with respect and kindness. And even if that just means looking up from your computer and smiling and saying hello to someone when they walk in the door, people want to be recognized. So make sure that you really cultivate that. And then finally, be mindful with difficult patrons. And this is something that I'm saying from experience too. Recently, I had a patron. He was homeless, and he had self-identified as a juvenile sex offender. And so that made a lot of people uncomfortable. And he and his girlfriend would just come into the library every day, basically set up camp all day. One time, he was spraying his shoes with some deodorizer, and I went over and I kind of snapped into prison librarian mode, and I'm like, what are you doing? And he snapped into prison library patron mode, and we just basically didn't have as good of an interaction as we could have had if I had approached it differently. So if someone's being difficult and you approach them in a harsher manner, they may respond in a harsher manner just because of their experience being in prison. However, that doesn't mean that you shouldn't hold people accountable. Still make them respect the patron code of conduct, you know, hold them accountable for their actions, because the library is a pro-social institution, and one of the things that we can do is help people learn those social skills to be successful on the outside.
I have 2 patrons right now who have a lot of difficulty whenever there is a situation that is foreign to them, where they feel like they're being blamed, and I really take that to heart. So if this person has an overdue magazine, it is generally a life or death situation for him. And so I just know to be very careful about how I interact with him, because, you know, he's practicing too. He's practicing not losing his mind every time he's got an overdue magazine. And I have another patron who, you know, practices being thankful for getting information from us. And if I'm snippy or I'm, you know, tired and the interaction doesn't go well, that's on both of us. Mm-hmm. So now we want to look at your responses. So Gail pointed out that she has GED, ESL, and job and resume help and adult literacy. That's great. Those are all wonderful programs and definitely contribute to a successful reentry. I have a program that I just started recently, which is a book discussion group with people who have low IQs, and we have someone who is learning English and is using this book discussion group as a way to improve his English. And I've already seen progress. It's really, those programs really do help.
So Teresa says, find forgiveness helps welcome all people to public libraries.
Awesome, awesome.
I am in complete agreement with that.
Absolutely. So we can't necessarily advocate that you eliminate fines, but they are a barrier to accessing library services. A lot of the patrons who were incarcerated are going to release to the county that they lived in and use the librarian. They may have, you know, old fines or lost material.
I've heard of some libraries offering a special like clean slate card. I believe Denver Public Library has one of those where, you know, you come in, you get a one-time fine forgiveness, and then you're good to use all the library resources that you can.
Let me see. Barbara Engstrom says they have a reentry clinic on the second month of the month I'm not quite sure what that acronym is, but I think it has something to do with King County, but it's Columbia Legal Services. I love Columbia Legal Services. There are a lot of difficulties surrounding reentry that are legal specific. You know, they have to coordinate child support or supervision. They have to work on maybe getting their LFOs reduced. They have to address past tickets to get a driver's license. So those reentry clinics are great, and Columbia Legal Services is an excellent resource for people in King and Pierce County.
So Jackson Q. Vance doesn't have a formal program, but staff helps people fill out the FAFSA. That's huge. Getting money to pursue your education, a tutoring lab, and a lending library of textbooks. That's awesome, because we all know how prohibitively expensive textbooks can be when you're pursuing an education.
And one thing that people who have filled out 8 million applications don't realize is that filling out an application can be very stressful and difficult. So just having another person physically present to say, yes, you do want to put your entire Social Security. If you don't know your income, here's the way that you can calculate it basically. So Leanne has GED and ESL programs, and that's great.
Jennifer has help with legal resources on reconnecting with family, parenting plans, etc. That's awesome.
Awesome. Oh, Barbara Engstrom has video visits at the Seattle and Kent branches. Oh, that's wonderful. So video visits are, it's like Skype, but for people who are incarcerated. And it gives them an opportunity to visit with their family. And I know that New York Public Library had a program like this, and I'm so glad that Seattle Public Library has adopted a program like this too, because so she mentions that JPay has a $13 fee for maintaining connection with family, and so JPay actually just got in trouble for kind of like finagling a competition for, you know, as an entry to win $1,000, and they were charging money to use the service, so it was basically like a lottery, which they weren't allowed to do. JPay is a private organization that runs a lot of the communication, a lot of the email services, and you can't see me doing air quotes because it's not quite email, but video visits are super important. And she also mentions it's a quiet, safe space for former inmates to think. Yes, exactly. Oh, Barbara Engstrom, thank you for the Public Law Library of King County. So in terms of that quiet, safe space to just exist and think, that is a huge one, because you know, and this is one of the things that I love most about libraries just in general, is that they're for everyone. And everybody who goes to the library is exactly the same as everybody else who's in the library. So I think that that is a super important one. And it's one that we don't value as much as I think we should.
Yep.
So we have Q&A time. But before, so if you type your questions into the box, what are your questions? What questions do you have about prison? What questions do you have about reentry that we could answer right now? And while you're typing, I would like to let everybody know that the Institutional Library Services, which is a program of the Washington State Library, an division of the Office of the Secretary of State, which has been providing this webinar and employs me, is going to have a couple of openings in our prisons coming up in the near future. So I'm going to type in the email addresses for myself and my supervisor, Laura Sherbo. If you or anyone you know is interested in learning, even just learning more about what a prison library job entails, please don't hesitate to contact us. And they will be in Western and Eastern Washington.
All right. How's everybody doing? We have thrown a lot of information at you, so if you want to send us an emoticon, let us know if you're happy. All right.
so I don't see any questions coming up. Hopefully that means that we are really good at our job.
And we've answered them all.
Yes, so Nona's just prompted us. We're working on it. Oh yes, we are working on a web page. So we'll talk a little bit about Walser shortly. Right now, I'm going to show you guys, Barbara Engstrom says, do most prisons have libraries? If so, do they have a budget to buy materials, or do they rely on donations?
Great question.
Great question. It depends on the state.
Yep.
It depends on the state. So we represent Washington and Colorado. And in Washington, there are Washington State Library branch libraries. In 8 of the major facilities, there's 9 branches. One of them is a multi-complex area. And we do have a budget to purchase material. We do also rely on donations. Sorry, I got a little distracted. So in Washington, yes, most prisons do have libraries. There are minimum facilities where people are remain for a shorter period of time, or there are fewer people at those facilities, and they might have a collection of books that a volunteer has coordinated or the chapel has coordinated. So it's kind of a difficult answer. The major facilities where people are incarcerated for longer periods of time do have Washington State Library branches.
In Colorado, the prison libraries were actually, we were employed by the Department of Corrections. We got the majority of our book budget from the Colorado State Library, but sometimes if there was extra money left over in the prison program's budget, it would be turned over to the library to purchase materials. I do know that federal prisons don't have library systems like the states do, but a lot of public libraries take the bookmobile to the prison libraries, and they worked out something like that.
And Jennifer just asked who we contact to make donations to the Washington prison libraries. And myself or Laura Sherbo. Laura Sherbo is the best contact. She is in charge of the entire program. And this is, I will mention, for the state hospitals as well. So Institutional Library Services provides library services to people in the prisons and the state hospitals. So those are psychiatric facilities for people who are experiencing mental health issues.
Donations are greatly appreciated, but sometimes institutions have different requirements about what they can accept. So a lot of times they won't accept hardbacks, or I've heard they won't accept romance materials. Mm-hmm. So just check with your local facility prior to donating and see what they can best use.
And we do accept romance, by the way. So Barbara asked if the prison libraries and legal materials are integrated into the same library, and the answer is no. So in Washington, there are 2 separate libraries, and that is one thing that the Department of Corrections is obligated to provide at all facilities, is access to legal material. So in all of the major facilities, there is a state library and a law library, and they are separate. We did try to have an integrated library, but for a variety of reasons, that pilot didn't thrive, and that isn't a situation that we have right now.
So shall we share the resources that we have?
Yeah. So one of the things that I have been working on in my position is this ILS Reentry Wiki. And I am going to go into web tour, so bear with me. We'll see how well this works. And hit enter. So on your screen,
oh no.
Just a minute. A 404 error. Let's see if this works. Okay, so this is a wiki that I have created that is a collection of reentry-specific resources. In your screen, thank you, Blackboard, you can click through and see what's available. There are resources for people who are currently incarcerated. If you scroll down, there are organizations like the Nalger Prison Dharma services that provide resources for people who are currently incarcerated. There are statewide resources for getting forms of identification. There's resources by county, and these are just services that I have located in my time that I have found particularly useful and have provided to people when they ask me for information. And while you click around on our website, Jeremy will share with you a couple of documents that we've created. And the 3 documents that we've created are a resource list of books that you might be interested in, and movies and videos about incarceration.
And online resources too.
Online resources. The URL for this wiki is available. There are also organizations that we like and enjoy, and if you're interested in volunteering for one of them, that's available. There's the IF Project, which is an organization that asks, you know, what would have changed, what could have happened in your life that wouldn't have led you, that, you know, would have changed the course. What if, you know, X, Y, Z? What if you were not abused as a child? What if you went to college instead of, you know, getting pregnant? Those kinds of things.
We also are going to send out the entire Ask Questions document so that you can be prepared with the answers to your policy questions when you meet people who are reentering in your library. And then finally we have our Conversation Toolbox 2.0. This is still a living document, but we just want to give you some conversation starters and talking points when you are speaking with people who might not understand the importance of helping people who are reentering society from prison.
So now we'll go back to our slides and give you some information about WALSR.
So WALSR stands for Washington Libraries for Successful Reentry, and there you see where you can join the listserv.
I've just shared that link in the chat box.
And so basically our mission is connecting people who are reentering the community with library services. As we said in this presentation, you know, if we can bring everyone up, it just helps create a safer community as a whole. So there's our contact information.
And WALSR is a pretty new organization. We are working with people who've attended previous trainings or WLA whale programs, and so if you're interested in getting involved, please join the listserv and contact us and let us know that you are interested in, you know, being involved in our project.
Yeah, we just want to spread the word, and we're stronger together as a whole. So, you know, maybe something that we've said today will spark an awesome program idea at your library, or even just connecting everyone together. Our vision is for this to go nationwide, so yeah, we will see. But thank you all so much for listening.
And Jeremy is going to give you some survey information.
Yes, thank you. I just wanted to remind folks we do have a very, very fast evaluation. If you could please fill it out. It's, I think, 4 questions ranked 1 to 5 sort of deal. Should be straightforward. We really appreciate it. Our funding from IMLS actually relies on a lot of this information that we send back to them.
And if anybody has any follow-up questions, please just feel free to email either of us. This is something that we're very passionate about. So, you know, we'd love even just an email that says, you know, this is great. We're interested in what you're doing.
Yeah.
So, thank you all.
So, any last-minute questions for our presenters?
Thank you, everyone, for coming, and thanks, Anna and Adrienne. That was so interesting. I really enjoyed it, and I learned a lot, even though I work with you, Anna. There's so much detail that I hadn't heard about before, and I think that the portal that you guys are creating is just fantastic, and I love that it's available to all libraries in the state and outside of the state. I mean, some of them are Washington specific, but anyway, I really enjoyed your presentation. Thank you so much.
All right. I don't see any questions. Thank you, Barbara. I'm going to go ahead and turn off the recording, and folks are free to mill about a little bit if they'd like and go ahead and discuss. Thank you for joining us.